was real and was made by a development studio with a very big publisher. To prove that he wasn't pulling this out of his arse, he released some screenshots and videos of gameplay in which he states that the game was created by a AAA publisher. As of now, this is all the evidence of the game we have, and nothing more about the game has been uncovered. Some people guess that the publisher for the game may have been EA, working with the developer N-Space, as the footage shown looked quite similar to another DS game they worked on, GoldenEye, Rogue Agent. This entry is super interesting, as when most games are lost, we at least know who the publishers and developers are, but when a game appears out of nowhere with an unknown publisher, it becomes much harder to find. This entry refers to the cancelled Dreamcast port for the game Half-Life from the early 2000s. A few years after Half-Life was released in 1998, Valve planned to port the game to both PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast due to the game's universal success. While they ended up going through with the PS2 port, the Dreamcast version was cancelled just weeks before release due to the god-awful reception of the Dreamcast. I mean, can you blame them? Imagine playing Half-Life on this fucking steaming pile of dog shit of a controller. Shit looks like a DVD player. This Dreamcast port is actually where the Half-Life DLC Blue Shift originates from, as it was originally meant to be a bonus level exclusive to the Dreamcast port. A few years after the port got cancelled, a build of the game late into development ended up getting found and made public. It's nice to finally talk about something that got found. This tier has been quite depressing. The build that was found was actually fully functional and able to be played on a real Dreamcast, meaning the game was pretty much done before they cancelled it. This entry refers to the downright criminal cancellation of 8, that's right, 8 single-player DLCs for Grand Theft Auto 5. According to source code leaks of GTA 5, Rockstar were planning 8 story DLCs, with one meaning to act as a prologue to the main story, with another potentially taking place in Liberty City. The reason for this cancellation is rather sad, and reveals a lot of the issues with the current gaming industry. The DLCs were ultimately scrapped in favor of diverting more attention to GTA Online, as it was and still is a huge money maker. Look, I get it. A business's goal is to make money, but still, eat my ass. LEGO Star Wars 3, The Clone Wars Beta, refers to a lost MMO browser game made in promotion for the game LEGO Star Wars 3. I actually remember playing this as a kid. Back in the day, there were a shit ton of LEGO Flash games you could play on their site, and they were always getting advertised in those shitty little pamphlets that would come with LEGO sets, begging you to join the LEGO Club, whatever that was. This game had quite a bit of content and would let you play as one of many Star Wars characters, and travel to multiple planets to play mini-games. Unfortunately, after Disney bought LucasArts, every Star Wars game in development was cancelled, this one included. Man, I don't know what's more of a tragedy, missing out on that cancelled third-person shooter, or this LEGO browser game. This entry refers to the English translation for the game Mother, titled Earthbound Beginnings. After Mother came out in 1989, Nintendo started working hard to localize the game, planning to release it overseas 2 years later. This localization was abruptly halted, however, as Nintendo felt it would be too hard to sell overseas. With the cult following that Earthbound gained in the US, this lost localization of Mother quickly became one of the most notorious cancelled video games ever. In the year 1998, a prototype cartridge containing the full English localization was uploaded for sale to a gaming forum website. It was bought rather quickly and later resold to a fan translation group that would circulate the game around the internet after removing some pesky anti-piracy code. Years later, in 2013, after a ton of requests from fans, Nintendo would go on to release Earthbound Mother 2 onto the Wii U Virtual Store. After seeing the huge success of the re-release in America, Nintendo gave in and finally made an official release of Earthbound Beginnings on the Wii U in 2015. Earthbound 64 refers to the planned Nintendo 64 Earthbound game that would eventually become Mother 3, which released on the Game Boy Advance. The N64 Earthbound game was in development for a total of 12 goddamn years, being the N64 game with the longest development time. The game would end up being cancelled temporarily in 2000, until development started again shortly after, with the game now being made for the Game Boy Advance. The playable version of this N64 Earthbound was shown to the public at Space World 1999, with the press receiving it quite well. According to a playtester for the Game Boy Advance version, a copy of this N64 version was out there and featured the game's first chapter. It's most likely that if this build exists, it's in possession of Nintendo or HAL Laboratories, but there's not really any way we could know for sure. This entry refers to Dynablocks, which was one of the names that Roblox was called early in its development. In the year 2003, the domain dynablocks.com would be registered. However, the name was quickly scrapped the next year over the new name Roblox. Up until 2020, the domain dynablocks.com would redirect you to the Roblox website, so there's no way to play this early version of Roblox. Using the Wayback Machine, you can see the site, but it's missing some CSS and asset files, and the version is understandably unplayable. This entry refers to the cancelled third installment in the Star Wars Battlefront series, the original ones, not the new ones. Development on this game began in 2007 by the devs Free Radical Design, using their new engine for the first time. The next year, in 2008, the game was still in a bit of a shit state, so Ubisoft sent over some producers to help Free Radical Design get the game ready for release, as it had already been delayed once. These big-wig Ubisoft producers were quite pedantic and treated the studio like a Chinese sweatshop, destroying team morale. Later in the year, LucasArts started to cut cost and cancel a ton of their projects, understandably scaring the shit out of Free Radical Design due to the state of the game. Due to these cut costs, LucasArts put an ungodly amount of pressure on the team to get the project done, setting unrealistic milestones and even refusing to pay staff. After a friendly corporate Christmas party at the end of the year, only to find that the doors to the office were locked, with a note telling them to meet at a nearby hotel where the majority of the team were sacked. That's rough, buddy. After this debacle, the team would be bought by Crytek, and Rebellion, who had invested a ton of money into the project, spoke with LucasArts and decided that there was no way the game would be finished by the deadline. So they ended up turning what they had into a bare bones handheld version titled Elite Squadron. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I refuse to work in the AAA video game industry and make indie games. After a few years of Battlefront 3's builds being lost, it eventually got leaked onto Reddit and 4chan in 2016 and is now playable with an Xbox development kit. Total Drama Avatar Creator refers to an online flash game made for the Canadian Teletoon franchise, Total Drama Island. If you were a kid in early 2010s Australia, Total Drama Island most likely made up like 80% of your TV entertainment. I swear to God, this show was on every single day for way longer than it should have been. After the introduction of the third season, Total Drama World Tour, which fucking blows, by the way, a flash game was released onto the Total Drama online website, which would let fans of the show make their own Total Drama OC, just like that Star Wars one. I have some distant memories of playing this game at some point, but I'm not 100% sure. The screenshots of this game look quite familiar, and it looks like something I definitely would have fucked around with as a kid with unrestricted internet access. Never mind, I just found out the site was restricted to Canada. I may have brain damage. Around the year 2014, the site Total Drama Online was taken down, and quite a bit of content became lost, including this avatar creator. Aside from some footage and screenshots, it's completely lost and will most likely stay that way. Sonic X-Treme was a planned 3D Sonic game for the Sega Saturn that was cancelled in 1996. It was a very linear 3D platforming game where players would control Sonic in wacky 3D environments with a fixed camera angle and a fisheye lens. The game didn't already produce enough motion sickness, so they decided to slap a fisheye lens onto it. Like a ton of cancelled games, Sonic X-Treme was in development hell, suffering from a ton of delays due to a lack of manpower and overworked developers. The game was nowhere near on track to be completed by Christmas, so Sega decided to cancel it and release Sonic 3D Blast instead. Honestly, an unfinished game would have been better than Sonic 3D Blast. While the game was lost for quite a bit, a ton of development and demo builds for the game have been recovered and are playable. While most sources claim that all the builds have been found, a few still theorize that there's more out there containing additional assets. Dinosaur Planet was yet another cancelled N64 game developed by Rare. Jesus, that's like, what, the third one? Dinosaur Planet was meant to be a third-person action game set in a world swarming with dinosaurs on a planet, I'm guessing. The game was first presented at E3 in 2000, after which Nintendo would make a proposition to Rare. They were quite impressed with the demo they had, and the two made an arrangement to reshape it into a Star Fox game. Yeah, Star Fox. Man, nothing reminds me more of the spaceship Fox shooting game more than a Planet of Dinosaurs. Dinosaur Planet. What was already made for Dinosaur Planet ended up being reshaped into the GameCube game, Star Fox Adventures, which is actually quite a banger. The demo shown of Dinosaur Planet was lost for quite a bit of time until 2021, when a CD-ROM containing the game was bought from a Swedish game collector and leaked online. This entry refers to the Japanese exclusive New Year DLC made for Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. According to the site Sonic Retro, this super cool lost DLC would place a Kadomatsu, a New Year's decoration, in Station Square. That's all it did. The DLC got released in December of 1998, and after New Year's celebrations came to a close, the DLC was yoinked out of the game. Due to the small amount of time it was active and the fact that it was exclusive to Japan, this DLC was lost for ages and was super hard to find. After the internet thought it was lost forever, it resurfaced online in 2009 when a guy found it on a Japanese memory card he bought. Look, I know there's been a ton of cool stuff in this tier that is still lost and will most likely never be found, but it's okay. We found these bamboo decoration things. Mission in Snow Driftland was a platformer flash game developed by Extratonic, published by Nintendo in 2006. That's right, motherfucker. Nintendo published flash games. Mission in Snow Driftland was a platformer very similar to Super Mario World, in which you would play through 24 levels, with each one being a part of an advent calendar. The game was up until January 16th, 2007, until it was discontinued, but popped up again back in 2010, where it would be discontinued again. We were really being edged with Mission in Snow Driftland after a video made by the YouTuber Nick Robinson. Oh, hey again, man. What's up? The search for the game was detailed, in which he found that the game was archived on Flashpoint, the program that was used to archive a ton of Flash games before the end of Flash. In said video, it was also announced that the game was going to be remastered by the original developers, Extratonic, and released on Steam, which it is now. This is a super rare occurrence where a lost game was not only remastered but put onto Steam for anyone to play. Will there be other entries like this on the iceberg? I don't know, we'll have to see. Did you know that Majora's Mask was originally meant to be an add-on to Ocarina of Time? I didn't. Zelda Gaiden was the name for a very early version of Majora's Mask, which was planned to be made for the Nintendo 64 disk drive. By now, if you've been paying attention, you little shit, you would be well aware of the 64 disk drive's tragic yet welcomed fate, and why a game in development for it would have been cancelled. This game actually got quite far into development, continuing development even after Ura Zelda was cancelled. While this was the case, Nintendo felt the game and its dungeons were way too similar to Ocarina of Time, so Miyamoto said fuck it and just made it into a whole new game, which would eventually become Majora's Mask. Regarding content of Zelda Gaiden, we have very little, just a few screenshots and early footage. This entry refers to Nicktropolis, an online MMO made for Nick.com in 2017. The game would let players make an avatar and walk around various Nickelodeon-themed locations, playing minigames based on Nickelodeon shows and socializing with other players. 3 years later, in 2010, the game was rebranded as The Club, which, while the content was updated, the game was pretty much the same thing. The game was later closed down in 2013. However, as of 2016, all the game's assets have been recovered. In 2023, an effort was made to remake Nicktropolis by a user named Time Warp Molly, and is downloadable on GameJolt right now until Viacom take it down. I never played this, but I just know I would have loved this game as a kid. I was completely obsessed with SpongeBob and played every single Nickelodeon Flash game I could find. Actually, that reminds me. I think I have my own piece of lost media to share. Fuck it, I'm making my own entry. I'm sorry about that title, I had no idea what to call it. Whenever I think about old Nickelodeon Flash games, I get a sudden jolt in my brain. One that makes me feel like I just got holes drilled into my skull and a part of my frontal lobe removed. I get vivid images of a site that I used to visit every single day as a kid, called nick2.com.au. It took me a ton of searching to find the name, but I'm fairly certain that that's it. From what I remember, it was a site hosting a ton of Flash games for Nickelodeon shows at the time, and doing some digging, I managed to find an entry on the fictional website wiki that shows a screenshot for the site, and it's definitely the one. By the way, why is it on the fictional website wiki? It is most certainly not a fictional website. Stop trying to gaslight me, Buster. Apart from this wiki, I can't find any other information on the site. And looking on the Wayback Machine, there's no snapshots of it. All I have is a single image. Keeping in the theme of lost Nickelodeon Flash games, there seems to be quite a few. Next we have Nickelodeon Game Builder, a Flash game from Nick.com in 2009. Not too dissimilar from Mario Maker, the game would let players create basic levels made up of assets themed around Nickelodeon properties. While there's a screenshot showing some of the other properties, I can only find footage of SpongeBob levels, which is a shame. Just imagine what an iCarly platformer would look like. Also, it's kind of whack how they used a banner showing the last Airbender movie instead of, you know, the show that was on Nickelodeon. This game was up for a few years, going through major updates at some point, changing the user interface and adding more features, until the game was shut down in 2013. After it closed down, the levels made were still able to be played for a while, until they were taken down too, making them accessible but unplayable. While you can still see them on the Wayback Machine, they're completely unplayable due to a missing SWF file, a reason why a ton of other Flash games are unplayable as well. Croc 3 Stone of the Gobbos is a rumored sequel to the PlayStation platformer Croc 2. This sequel was supposedly set to release for Xbox, PS1 and PS2, and would follow the story directly after Croc 2, where the titular Croc would have to go onto an adventure to find, the Stone of the Gobbos, I'm guessing. This game had a little bit of hype around it for the 10 Croc fans in existence, until it turned out that the whole thing was a hoax, and there was never gonna be a Croc 3. Why someone would lie about something as precious and sacred as Croc 3, I don't know, it's evil. That's right, Buster. Not only did the original GTA have a cancelled N64 port, but also a cancelled Sega Saturn port. Whoa, what a surprise. A cancelled game for the Sega Saturn of all consoles? Who would have guessed? Me. I fucking guessed. Much like the N64 port from the start of the tier, Rockstar planned to port GTA over to the Sega Saturn as well, but due to the absolutely abysmal failure of the Sega Saturn, Rockstar made the wise decision to cancel the port, allowing them to put more effort into the PC port by doing so. Apart from some magazine scans talking about the port, we have no builds of the version, and there's little information surrounding it. Super Mario Disc version, also known as Super Mario 64 DD, I think you know how this story goes, was a planned port of Super Mario 64 for the N64 disc drive. For quite a long time, information surrounding the disc port was very spare. All we knew was that it would feature Luigi as a playable character. Some thought that it was going to serve as a sequel to the first game, a Super Mario 65, if you will. That's the second time I've made that joke in this video. But after looking at some footage of the game taken from Space World 96, it appeared to be the same game. Due to the short 2-year lifespan and cancellation of the disc drive, Mario 64 DD, along with a ton of other disc drive games, were cancelled, as you probably know. Eventually, in 2014, after the world thinking it was lost for good, a French game collector managed to get a copy of the port at a retro game shop in Japan and dumped it online. Epic. Zelda 64 refers to a lost beta version of the Ocarina of Time. First shown at Space World in 1995, Zelda 64 was set to be a sequel to Zelda 2 and was in development for, the N64 disc drive. Eventually, in 1997, Nintendo would come out and say that it was going to be a standard cartridge release, meaning that they would have to cut out some of the content due to the decrease in storage space. This is actually where Ura Zelda comes from, as it was meant to be a secondary 64 DD add-on, containing some of this cut content. This Zelda 64 version of Ocarina of Time still remains lost. However, attempts have been made at recreating it, with the Giga Leaks in 2020 revealing content from Ura Zelda. Content originating from Zelda 64 was found as well, such as some unique enemies and cut locations. The next year, in 2021, a game preservationist known as Forest of Illusion dumped a development cartridge for the game F-Zero-X, which for some reason contained some map data that looked to be from the Space World build of Zelda 64, which turned out to be just that. Using this data, modders have been able to convert it and make it playable in Ocarina of Time in order to explore the cut areas. I don't know how, in God's name, you would do that. It sounds like witchcraft. This entry refers to the cancelled PlayStation port of Superman 64. Yes, that Superman 64. Highly regarded to be one of, if not the worst game of the N64. Not long after its release in 1999, its developers hired Blue Sky Software to port the game to N64, but when development started, one big issue came up. The PlayStation was not able to handle the open world city found in the original game, as well as the polygon count of Superman's ass cheeks, meaning that they would have to remake the game from scratch. This game supposedly got quite far into development, so far in fact that pre-ordering it was available. It was well on track to getting released. That was until Blue Sky lost their rights to Superman, and they had no choice but to cancel it. After years of the game being lost, and after a long and tedious search, the full game was eventually uploaded in 2020. So was it any better than the N64 version? No, it was just as bad. Donkey Kong Racing Adventure was a cancelled sequel to Diddy Kong Racing that was pitched to Nintendo in 2004 and rejected. The story of the game would take place directly after the first and would have introduced a ton of new features, most notably the ability to maneuver a character while riding a vehicle, as well as being able to switch vehicles mid-race. This game was actually completely unknown to the general public all the way up until 2016, when a guy got his hands on a prototype build and made a video about it. 4 years later, in 2020, another build that was completely playable was leaked online. You know what I think of when I hear the word Mario? Gambling, roulette in particular, and so did Konami back in 1991 when they wanted to make an arcade Mario roulette game reusing assets from Super Mario World. Mario Roulette consisted of a basic roulette game which, when won, would dispense credits to players that could be used to redeem prizes at an arcade. I couldn't find when, but at some point these machines went out of commission, likely some point in the mid to late 90s, which at that point meant the game was lost. It remained lost until 2020 when a ROM for the game was dumped online, allowing fans of Mario to simulate gambling once again. Pretty soon after the DS was released in 2004, Sega began to jump at the chance to shit out a Sonic game for the new evolution in handheld technology. At E3 that year, Sega showed off a tech demo named Sonic DS. Wow, real fucking creative, guys. From the looks of the demo, it seemed to be a standard 3D Sonic game, in which Sonic was controlled by moving the stylus left and right on the bottom screen. To this day, it's unknown whether or not this was an actual game Sega was making, or if it was just a tech demo for the DS. While a fake ROM for this demo has been spotted online, the real thing still remains lost.